All right, so in Google Classroom, you will notice again that you have three assignments this week, I should say, 4 links. We're going to go over the primary source packet and the quiz today. A reminder again that you have week 3's air review quizzes and the local government assignment assigned to you as well. So please make sure you take care of that. Now, when it comes to the primary source packet here, you'll notice we put together small little snippets of different documents to make sure that you understand exactly kind of what the air test will do. They're going to give you stuff like this to read and then multiple choice extending off of it. It's called a STEM question, okay? So they'll give you some random thing that we have never gone over, okay? Or they're going to give you something like the Declaration of Independence, which we have gone over, okay? So it's good review in that regard. But every once in a while, they'll give you kind of like a Supreme Court case, or they'll give you some sort of, law, document, speech, something along that line, or they're going to give you a chart or a graph or a map or something like that, and they're going to ask you some sort of questions off of that. So we kind of mirrored that in this activity. So document 1, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. It's a lot of words that you've heard before. What are they really just saying here? Let's start with the words alter or abolish. What does alter mean? Change? Abolish? Get rid of. So we're going to change or get rid of the government. Who's the government in regards to the Declaration of Independence? Who are they getting rid of? It's a nice way of saying who do we declare our independence from? The British, right? Okay, Great Britain. The Declaration of Independence, the easiest way to remember this, the Declaration of Independence is our way of writing to England saying, "Dear England, it's not you, it's me. I need my space. And we need space for each other to grow into the people we're going to be one day, but we're not going to grow together." It's a breakup letter. That's all the Declaration of Independence is. We're breaking up with Great Britain. And Great Britain does not take it well. They're the X that keeps on DMing us, private messaging, PMing us. Hey, you up? Hey, you up? Hey, you up? Like, instead they send soldiers. Okay? And they try and basically force us to be in a relationship with them. So if nothing else, they're an abusive X. I know that sounds stupid, but that literally is the relationship we're talking about here. Okay? So needless to say, the Declaration of Independence is a breakup letter. Now, if you know that, and then you go to the primary source quiz, document 1, the Declaration's choice of language in this passage would most closely be aligned with which era? So this is stretching back to your freshman year. Okay? Now, we talked about it a little bit this year, obviously, but your freshman year in World Studies, you talked about the Revolutionary Era. Okay? The Dark Ages, the Enlightenment, Renaissance, or the Progressive Era? How we doing? Which one is it? The Renaissance back in the 1500s. It's the Enlightenment, right? Okay, so the answer to this one is the Enlightenment. Remember, the Enlightenment was a time period of people like Voltaire and Montesquieu and John Locke. The Declaration of Independence comes directly from John Locke. Okay, so needless to say, Enlightenment is the time where reason starts to take over. And look, the Enlightenment time period and the Renaissance isn't necessarily a bad answer. And this is something the air test will do. They'll put 2 like-minded time periods together and make you choose which one it is. Okay. Now, obviously, if you know the Renaissance was back in the 1500s, 1776 is not in the 1500s, so you would eliminate that. But the mindset's the same. So to say the Renaissance isn't necessarily wrong, it's in that mindset, okay? The Enlightenment is the newer version of the Renaissance. Whereas the Renaissance was, we're going to start questioning, the earth, and we're going to start questioning a little bit about where we come from and whatever else. The Enlightenment literally is the next step to that. The Enlightenment literally is, we're going to use logic and reason to explain things. Prior to the Enlightenment, if somebody was to say, why is the sky blue? A minister or a priest would say, well, because God made it that way, and everybody would say, oh, okay. Well, during the Enlightenment, there were people who started to say, well, wait a minute. There's got to be a scientific way that happens. There's got to be some explanation more so than, well, God made it that way. I wonder if it has something to do with refraction of light, or, how light is broken down into colors. Okay, they start doing actual experimentation. Now that's the scientific part. So it's people like Isaac Newton. It's people like, I'm blanking on his name, Anton von Leeuwenhoek, looking through the microscope and seeing bacteria for the first time. Like, all these guys start doing these scientific experimentations to try and figure out what the world is. At the same time, there are philosophers who are asking the same questions about politics. Why is the king in charge? Well, God put him there. Well, why did God put him in charge? What was it that God saw in this leader that made him all powerful? And when people start questioning that, you start getting things like the American Revolution. Okay, because prior to this, look, most Englishmen would never have questioned their king. The Americans, because they were a sea away, because we were across the Atlantic Ocean, they felt comfortable questioning the authority of a guy who literally was 3 months by boat away. That logically it didn't make sense. If we needed a law change, why do we need to get on a boat, go 3 months over the sea, ask him, and then 3 months back to say, yes, we can do it? Because at best, you're talking about a half a year before you figure out what whether or not the change of the law is going to happen. So people like Thomas Jefferson start saying, this is ridiculous. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, George Washington, all of our founding fathers kind of come to the conclusion that this is not the correct government for us. Hence the breakup letter. Now in there, it says the words despotism and tyranny were utilized in this passage to show the colonists' dislike of what form of government. Well, going back here, you will notice the wording of long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism. Okay, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for the future security. Well, here's the thing, a question like this, you've already told me that the government of Great Britain was a king. What's a nice way of saying king out of these options? A monarchy. So just by knowing that, you've got the next one. Notice how the air test gives you this long, because let's be honest, as soon as I put a passage up, I noticed 3 of you put your heads down and were immediately like, oh my God, reading. And yet, just by doing small little, reasonable guesses here, you've got the first 2, okay? The rights claimed in the passage to throw off such government would represent which theory of government, okay? Now this one we haven't gone over a tremendous amount, but you did go over it your freshman year, okay? There's the divine right theory, the force theory, the social contract theory, or the theocratic theory. Have you heard any of these theories before? You've heard of a theocracy, but there's no theory involved with it, okay? So that's one that you can throw out immediately. What does theocracy mean? You know? Cracy means rule by, okay? So it's a government. Rule by theo. Anybody know what theo means in Greek? If you're a theologian, you are a studier of religion. So it's ruled by religion. There are only a few places in the world that have a government run by their religion, okay? One of them would be Iran. Another one would be the Vatican City, because the Pope rules the Vatican, okay? It doesn't happen very often, and most of the time we try and avoid it. Afghanistan used to have the Taliban, which that's who we were fighting after 9/11, because they were a government based upon very strict Sharia law under the Islamic faith, okay? and they were allowing terrorists to train within Afghanistan, which is how 9/11 occurred. Okay, so theocracy has nothing to do with this document. We're not talking about religions. Okay, the King of England was not ruling over us because of his religion, so that's out. Have we heard of any of these others? Divine right, force, or social contract? Yes, sir. Do you remember what the divine right theory is? Yes. God put them there. Okay? God put them there. Divine meaning God, the right of God. Okay? The right of God to choose the leader. Well, if we know that the Enlightenment is kind of going against the religious teachings of the time and going against the governments of the time, then it's not going to be divine right. But this would be one of those questions that you would say, well, I at least have heard of this, so I'll click that one, okay, because I've heard of it. There is one other that you should have heard of, and we talked about it in this class very early on. This is ages ago. It's the social contract. What does social mean? A lot of people doing what? Talking, right? Discussing. What's a contract? An agreement. So social contract means a verbal agreement. We talked about it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be written. The social contract theory was John Locke. Okay, John Locke, the English philosopher, said that you give up some of your rights to the government in exchange for protection. The easiest way for me to explain that in your situation right now is, how many of you guys have a driver's license right now? Okay. Vogelsong, I'm going to pick on you, Vogelsong, just because I can. You ever been pulled over for speeding? Yes? I took a guess. All right. Did you know you were speeding at the time? So you knew it and you did it anyway, right? And the police held you accountable. Oh, okay, so he gave you a warning. You must have smiled. All right. But here's the point. Why do we have a speed limit? Vogelsong, how fast were you going? How? 60? What was the speed limit? 40. Okay. Don't be embarrassed. Everybody in the room has done something stupid, okay? But here's the point. Were you controlling the car? You weren't being reckless? A little bit. Okay. So why do we have a speed limit? To protect people, right? Notice, why do we have a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit during school hours? Because a kid could run out from the playground and get hit by a car. So we want to make sure everybody around a school zone is going a certain mile per hour to make sure the safety of those kids is observed, okay? Even around the high school, because we have walkers. We have people that walk home, walk across the street into the neighborhood. We want to make sure people are going 20. That way, if one of our students darts out into the crosswalk, they've got time to stop. Because let's be honest, if you're going 60 miles per hour in front of Northwest High School and somebody darts out into the crosswalk, are you going to be able to stop? Probably not, okay? So those rules are put in place. Now, can you control, if I were to ask honestly, Vogelsong, the road out front, Pippin, could you drive up and down that at 60 miles per hour and still control your car? Really? You couldn't? Let's say there's no traffic. 3 a.m., nobody on the road. Could you, because isn't Pippin basically just a straight line from here all the way down to Houston? I mean, that curve's a little rough, but, you know, you could go 60 and not have a problem. But why do we institute that? So that all people that are driving are on the same playing field, and we are in a residential area. So they put those in place to protect everybody else, to protect walkers, to protect other drivers. There's a lot of turns there. If you're going 60 and somebody's trying to turn onto Civic Center, it might be a little bit of a problem, okay? So they're putting those laws in there. Now, you have ceded that right. You have said, I will forgive my right. And let's put it this way. On the highway, are there people in here that could drive 100 miles per hour in their car and not hit anybody? Folks, we wouldn't have NASCAR if there weren't drivers capable of doing that. But not everybody could. You know people in your family. You might be one of them that couldn't go 55 on the highway without hitting somebody. Okay, so in order to level the playing field, to make sure that everybody's kind of safe, we say, all right, on the nation's highways, it'll be 65, 70, whatever the local ordinance is going to be. Okay. In other countries, that may not be the case. In Germany, there is the Autobahn. There's no speed limit on the Autobahn. Okay, you can go as fast as you want. Now, there are areas that they say, all right, this is dangerous terrain, so we're going to slow things down. But this is the easiest way for me to explain social contract. You have ceded your right to drive 100 miles per hour on the highway in order to have safety on the highway for everybody else. Okay, that's the social contract. I've given up some of my rights for protection. Okay, to make sure that the government can basically protect the people. All right. Now that is what the social contract theory is in a nutshell. Thomas Jefferson in the document is saying, hey, governments are instituted among men to protect them. But the moment they don't protect us, the moment they violate that contract, we have the right to alter or abolish it. Okay? That was the whole point of the document. Okay? Now you'll notice it moves on to Federalist 10. Anybody know what the Federalist Papers were designed to do? What were the Federalist Papers supposed to do? Folks, you just took a diagnostic quiz on them last week. Federalists and anti-Federalists? Do you at least remember what document they were arguing about? The Bill of Rights. You're close. Bill of Rights were involved with it. It's attached to it, as are all 27 amendments. Come on, folks, what did we amend? The Constitution of the United States. Very good. Okay. The Federalists were in favor of the Constitution. They were telling us the Articles of Confederation did not work. We need a new document, a new government. So the Constitution became our new form of government. James Madison was one of those people. He was a Federalist. And along with Alexander Hamilton, who eventually gets shot by Aaron Burr, okay, that's years later, okay, and an entire act later if you're a Hamilton fan from Broadway, okay. And then another guy that is always the forgotten founding father, a guy named John Jay, okay. All three of them sat down and wrote these documents in favor of the Constitution. Now, there were anti-Federalists, okay. These anti-Federalists said that they didn't trust this document, okay, and they didn't like that there were things that were not in the Constitution. They felt that there should be things there in the Constitution. And forgive me, I'm still learning names. Webster, correct? Webster is correct when she said the Bill of Rights. That's what the anti-Federalists are going to push for, that there's no list of rights saying you have this right, and this right. Without the anti-Federalists, there is no First Amendment. Without the anti-Federalists, there is no Second Amendment, okay? They pushed for a list of rights. Not surprisingly, the guy that's going to write them out is the same guy that's supporting the Constitution. Madison was so in favor of the Constitution, he was willing to compromise and say, if you want a list of written rights, then I will write them out. We'll add them onto the document after it's ratified, okay? And we'll kind of handle it once we start the government. So there was some compromise at the very beginning of our republic. Now, before that, they're writing these, and the Federalist Papers were written in New York specifically to support the document through ratification. Ratification is certifying the document that New York is saying, yes, we're okay with it, okay? Now, he says, in this, among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. Anybody know what a faction is? It's a group, very good, okay? It's a group that specifically disagrees with the government. So put it into modern day terms, can anybody name a faction? A group that just doesn't agree with the government, that doesn't like the government's plan, doesn't like the government's actions? Come on, folks, they were marching all last summer. Well, hopefully not, but they would be considered a faction. You're not wrong, Chapman. Not the one I was looking for, but you're not wrong, okay? They don't like the government's actions toward minorities. They don't like the government's actions towards immigration. So yes, you would consider the KKK a faction, okay? We've heard of Black Lives Matter, right? That's a group that's pretty ticked with the government, right? They've asked for one thing, a discussion about police tactics and enforcement. Have they received it? No, hence the marches. Okay? Did they do things that were outside the boundaries of the law? Yeah, when you block traffic, that's a problem. Okay? When people at the marches turn to violence in any form, that's a violation of the law. So there were problems there. Any sort of faction has its elements of disorder, if you will. And why? They're not being heard. Okay? Now that's what Madison is talking about here. He said, among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. What is he saying? We have set up a government in the Constitution that handles this. I want to point out to you, the biggest faction we had in the past year happened on January 6th. A group of really misguided people decided to run into the Capitol building and disrupt our presidential election, the certification of it. Okay? I don't care what your political leanings are, they were wrong. It was a violent mob. They deserved to be arrested. Okay? The faction that was there actually proves Madison right, because is our government still standing? Yeah, Joe Biden took the oath of office. We had a transfer of power. It was a little rough, but hey, we got through it. Our government survived. So if January 6th proved anything, it proved that Madison, back in the Federalist Papers, was right. They're loud, they're obnoxious, we survived. Union still stands. Okay? Country moves on, government still is alive. Okay? So that's what he's talking about here. He said, the friend of a popular government never finds himself so much alarmed for their character and fate as when he contemplates their propensity to this dangerous vice. He will not fail, therefore, to set a due value on any plan which, without violating the principles to which he is attached, provides a proper cure for it. The instability, injustice, and confusion introduced in the public councils have, in truth, been the moral diseases under which popular governments have everywhere perished, as continue to be the favorite and fruitful topics which their adversaries to liberty derive their most specious declamations. Okay, look, this is a lot of words. Bottom line, what is he talking about? Faction cannot beat this government. We actually have compromise. Okay, so let's look at the actual questions here. Okay, in Federalist 10, Madison is arguing in favor of the ratification of which document? You already know. We've already talked about it's the Constitution. Okay, that's just asking basically, do you know what the Federalist Papers are doing? Document 2, what does Madison argue will happen in the event of faction or conflicts of rival parties under this new system of government? Okay, it says the government will fall apart and fail to enforce laws. The government will bow to the will of the mob. The government will split into two major political parties forever. The government will give voice to the minority but follow the majority. Which one did it do? The last one. That's what we've done all the way through. Does the Klan have the right to march in the streets? They do. They have to ask permission, just like every other protest, but they have the right. You may hate what they say, and deservedly so, but they have the right to do it. What do we also have the right to do? Mock them. Okay, we have the right to speak out against them. We have the right to counter-protest. If you've ever noticed during a presidential election, they have conventions where they kind of promote, they just did it last summer with Biden and with Trump. They had conventions to promote their candidate and to allow people to speak and celebrate the nominations right outside the convention hall for years. Every single time one of these things happen, there are people out there yelling and screaming for everything under the sun, and people also across the way that are yelling counter to them. Every one of them has a right. You know what ends up happening at the end of it? We elect a president. Doesn't matter what they say out front. We still elect a president. We move on. Okay? So Madison has been born to be true here in the Federalists. He is true. He is correct. Factions still exist, but the majority continues on. Okay? Madison refers to the inability to control the violence of faction under this new union as, okay, the ability to control violence of faction under this new union. So If this faction becomes violent, so let's say the Capitol Hill riot, okay, does he view our ability as a union to survive that as a vice? What is a vice? If you have a vice. I'm sorry? Okay, in vice president, it would be second. Yes, you are correct. It's one way vice is defined. So that's where you've heard it before, obviously. A vice could also be considered a sin, something that is wrong. Okay, a character flaw. Okay, I have a vice for swearing. I have a vice for what you just have some sort of character flaw that you're not really proud of. That's what a vice is. Okay, so would that be a vice? Would it be an advantage, a force, or evidence? Okay, you could say maybe a force. This is where two words could be. Force is kind of the second best choice. If you can have violence and still survive, that's an advantage. Okay, so the answer would be an advantage. Document 3, which of the following is not a power of the Congress under the Article 1 of the Constitution? So you go to the documents here. This is one of the longer ones. It's a list of rights. Okay, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, to borrow money, to regulate commerce, which is a nice way of saying trade, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization, which is a nice way of saying immigration, to coin money, to provide for punishment of counterfeiting, to establish post offices, to promote progress of science and useful arts, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. So that means courts that aren't really part of the judicial system, to define and punish piracies and felonies, to declare war. Remember, Congress is the only part of the government that can declare a war. Okay, the president cannot. And then to raise and support armies. Okay, so it says, which of the following is not a power of Congress? Is it the power to coin money, power to nominate justices, power to declare war, power to regulate commerce or trade? Justices, correct. If you remember, Donald Trump nominated 3 Supreme Court justices. That is the job of the president. The Congress confirms them, okay, in the Senate, okay, but they don't nominate. According to Article 1, Congress can borrow money on which of the following? The good word of the president, the rule of naturalization, the establishment of post offices, or the credit of the United States. This one's just a common sense thing. What do you borrow money on? Can you walk into a bank and say, you know I'm good for it? Your credit, right? They're going to immediately look at your credit score. Okay, so you don't even really need to read the document to know that one. The third question, according to Article 1, Congress can punish those accused of spying, counterfeiting, treason, or borrowing money. This is just, do you know which crime is the only crime that is mentioned in the Constitution? Okay. You will notice that when they said to define and punish piracies and felonies, okay, committed on the high seas, offenses against the law of nations, to declare war, okay. Let's see, where is it? This might have been a little confusing. I apologize. You kind of need to know this one just straight up, I think. Congress can punish those accused of only one thing, and that's treason. It's the only crime that's mentioned in the Constitution. Okay, counterfeiting's in there, but they're talking about, hey, we need to regulate our money. They're not prosecuting. That's still that's still the job of the judicial. Okay, but treason is the only one that you can go against. This is why when January 6th happened and they were accusing Donald Trump of treason, that was Congress. They have the right to do that. They have the right to bring him up on treason charges. What is treason, by the way? If I accuse you of treason, what is it? Betraying your country. Okay? Selling out your country. If I'm in the intelligence business and I send an email to one of our enemies and say, hey, I know how to break into Fort Knox and steal gold. I'm willing to sell you that information for a certain amount of money. I would be committing treason against the United States. By the way, what is the punishment for treason? Anybody know? It's death. Sell out your country, you're dead. That's it. There's really no other way. You're either guilty or you're not. Okay? We have killed people for treason. Okay? I don't know if you remember the name Rosenberg, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, a married couple. They worked in the nuclear program. They sold the Russians a bunch of information about how to make a nuclear weapon during the Cold War. They were accused of it, tried of it, found guilty, and executed. Okay? So yes, the government can execute you for treason, which is why when they accused Donald Trump of treason, it wasn't just like political grandstanding. They literally were putting him on trial for his life. Now, of course, in Congress, they were throwing him out of office, but had he been found guilty and thrown out of office, the judicial branch can then swoop in and say, oh, by the way, on that treason, we're now trying you for your life. Now, since he was found not guilty and allowed to continue on in the role of the president, and technically he wasn't president at the time, okay, that was one of the big arguments, is that he had left office by that point, so no harm, no foul. But there were a lot of people saying, well, no, there is, because he allowed for this insurrection to take place on Capitol Hill. Okay, it gets way more complex than that. I don't want to get too involved in that, but that's kind of the, Congress can punish those accused of treason. Okay, power of the legislative branch in the state of Ohio is vested in legislative power of the state shall be vested in the General Assembly. That is what we call our Congress at the state level. Okay, so it is the General Assembly. According to Article Section 1, who have the right to initiate laws or call them up for a statewide vote if legislature does not act upon the issue? Okay, so who has the right to initiate laws or call them for statewide vote? Okay, they move on. They reserve the power to adopt or reject any law, section of any law, or item appropriating money, except hereafter provided, independent of the General Assembly, to propose amendments to the Constitution and to adopt or reject the same polls. The limitations expressed in the Constitution, the power of the General Assembly can enact laws, shall be deemed limitations of the power of the people to enact laws. Okay? So what are they saying here? According to Article 2, Section 1, who have the right to initiate laws or call them for statewide vote if the legislature doesn't act upon the issue? Does the governor, the people, the Supreme Court, or the city councils? Well, who's the only group out of this that was mentioned in there? The people. So yes, you have the right of initiation. If you don't like that the government hasn't handled something, feel free. Okay. Supreme Court case was we're moving on to document 5. The Supreme Court case was primarily dealing with the issue of, well, what document are we talking about? We're talking about Plessy versus Ferguson. Do you guys remember Plessy versus Ferguson from last year? 1896. The key phrase in the entire thing, see if I can find it here. There is a race so different from our own that we do not permit those belonging to it to become citizens of the United States. Persons belonging to it, with few exceptions, absolutely excluded from our country. I allude to the Chinese race, but the statute in question, a Chinaman can ride the same passenger coach with a white citizen of the United States, while citizens of black race in Louisiana, many of whom perhaps risk their lives for the preservation of the Union, who are entitled by law to participate in the political control of the state and the nation, who are not excluded by law of any reason of their race. So what is this really about? Race. Specifically what? 1896. And keep in mind, it's the dissenting opinion, which means this justice disagreed with the opinion. Does he sound like he's in favor of separating races or for uniting them? If he's saying, hey, the Chinese race that we've already excluded in some capacities can still ride with the white race in the same passenger car, but the black race cannot, what's he really saying? Is he in favor of segregation? making the argument that, hey, he and I can ride in the same cart, but you can't because you're a female. Is he really saying that that's fair? How is it fair that, you know, this happens? He's basically saying this is stupid. Keeping the races segregated was stupid because this was the court case, if you remember the key terms, separate but equal, which allowed Jim Crow laws to be legal. That's what Plessy versus Ferguson was. This is the justice that disagreed with that. So Justice Harlan is the only one on the Supreme Court, mind you, that voted against it. Every other justice said, no, it's fine to have separate but equal. This allowed for blacks and whites to be separated in schools, to be separated on buses, to be separated on trains, separate, you know, bathroom facilities, whatever, okay? They were saying, well, as long as it's separate but equal, then it's fine. Now, if you remember from your history class last year, it was never equal, okay? The white schools would have teachers who were certified with newer textbooks, newer technologies, and the black schools would have a school, but it'd be run down with teachers that were not certified and a textbook from like 50 years ago. That's not equal, okay? It was not equal access, and that's why in 1954, they struck down this opinion in Brown versus the Board of Education, okay? Now, knowing that background knowledge, and then going here, Supreme Court case primarily dealing with the issue of civil rights, suffrage, progressive reforms, or electoral politics. Which one? Civil rights, okay? Supreme Court decided the law of which state was constitutional in this case. Well, you'd have to know that Plessy versus Ferguson happened in the South, so that takes Ohio out of it, okay? You would think it is Louisiana, okay? Plessy versus Ferguson, and it's right here in the document, okay? Citizens of black race in Louisiana, okay? So it is Louisiana. And then the word dissenting in the title would imply that the passage was supporting, calling into question, disagreeing with the court, or calling attention to the absence. Okay, it's disagreeing with the court's decision. So this is Justice Harlan saying, I'm against what you guys did, okay? Which of the following phrases are most associated with this case? Okay, I already told you it's separate but equal, okay? And that's stretching back to 10th grade, okay? Which you should have heard this last year, is my point. Document 6, the act of Congress would have enforced the constitutional, would have enforced which constitutional amendment? So the Volstead Act. 66 Congress of the United States of America, the first session begun and held in the city of Washington on Monday, the 19th day of May, 1919. So we're talking about 1919. An act to prohibit intoxicating beverages and to regulate the manufacture, production, use, and sale of high-proof spirits for other than beverage purposes. So what are they limiting here? Liquor, yeah? It's all alcohol. Well, what amendment was that? 18th Amendment, very good, okay? That was prohibition. Easiest way to remember these, 18 and 21. At the age of 18, you cannot legally purchase alcohol. You are prohibited from purchasing alcohol. 21st Amendment said it was okay. At the age of 21, have a beer. Okay, 18 and 21. 18, you're an adult but can't have alcohol. 21, go ahead. Okay, easiest way to remember 18 and 21st Amendments. Okay, the government program during this time frame of 1919 to 1933 was called isolationism, progressivism, populism, or prohibition. It was prohibition. You were prohibited from drinking alcohol. Program and constitutional amendment ended in failure with the repealing of the program by the 21st Amendment. Okay, 18 and 21. All right. Document 7 is a map. And it's asking who won the election in 1912. Okay, you have the Democratic Woodrow Wilson, you have the Progressive or Bull Moose Party candidate Theodore Roosevelt, and the Republican Taft. Just based upon the colors on the map, who won the election? Wilson, right? And you know that because that's the Electoral College map. And remember, the Electoral College is the one that elects the president. Okay, which of the following is the reason he won? Okay, He received 42% of the popular vote, more than any other candidate. No one won, as no candidate was over 50%. He won the majority of the votes in the Electoral College, or he won the largest states on the map. He won the majority. Very good. So remember, it's always the Electoral College. A popular vote has nothing to do with it. If no one secures the outright win in the presidential election, what occurs? Okay, so if nobody wins the Electoral College, and that was a three-way race in 1912, okay, let's say nobody gets to the magic number. Currently, it's 270. Remember, 270 to win. Okay, if nobody makes it, what happens? Does the Senate nominate a new president? Does the House vote for the next president out of the three candidates? Does the election, is the election redone until there is a winner, or is the person with the highest amount of votes wins regardless? What happened? Do you guys remember, if nobody wins the Electoral College, where does it go? Say it. Say it loud, say it proud. Goes to the House of Representatives. This is why Donald Trump was working so hard to discount Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. If he got those three states to say that there were election problems and those votes didn't count, they were thrown out, nobody would have been over 270. Biden would have been below 270 Electoral College votes if those three states were thrown out. In that instance, then the House of Representatives would have to choose who won the presidency. And it goes to a committee of the whole, excuse me, where every state only gets one vote. Most states are Republican controlled. So Donald Trump would have been reelected president had that happened. Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard these conspiracy theories out there that, oh, well, you know, in March, Donald Trump will be declared the winner. Somebody came out the other day. I don't know if you know the kook that runs MyPillow, Mike Lindell. The guy's like, I'm ate MyPillow. The guy with the weird mustache or whatever else. He's a huge Trump supporter. Okay. He went on a radio show yesterday and said, in August, Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. He will be put in. And what their argumentation is that these states will find out that their elections were rigged or flawed or whatever else and throw out their Electoral College votes. And then the House will then vote Donald Trump back into the White House. As with most conspiracy theories on the internet, they're stupid. Okay? It's not going to happen. That's not how it works. Okay? He should stick to making pillows. Okay? So again, anytime you read something on the internet that you're just like, man, that sounds weird, it is, and move on. Okay? That's one of our problems in this nation right now is people believe too much garbage from the internet. Okay? So if no one secures, it is the House that votes them in. Okay? These people are marching to demand enforcement of the blank amendment. All right, so we've got a picture now. It's a photo from the March on Washington in 1963. What are they demanding? Okay, voting rights. All right, demand enforcement of which amendment? Anybody remember what the suffrage amendments are? 19th Amendment is for who? Women voting. Okay, suffrage means voting. Okay, so women's voting. Is that what these folks are marching for? Who are they specifically? Okay, anybody remember which amendment allowed African Americans the right to vote? 15. Okay. 13 was the abolition of slavery. 15 was African American right to vote. 19 was women. 26th Amendment was Vietnam, okay, where they were lowering the voting age. March on Washington, Vietnam is starting at that point, but we're not to the point where people are burning draft cards and, you know, demanding their voting rights. Okay. March on Washington, by the way, was basically culminated in Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Okay. They were seeking the right to vote. Never mind, it was about 100 years after the actual passage of the 15th Amendment. To say that the American government is a little slow on the uptake is, these people are marching because their rights are being violated by the national government's failure to pass suffrage amendments, national policies that only allow for white men to vote, state policies that infringe upon the constitutional rights, the overuse of the supremacy clause by the federal government. This is key. Who runs elections? Who's in charge of an election? When you sign up to vote, who do you register with? The state. If the state registers you to vote, then the state is the one running the election. Therefore, if you know that, which is the only one that makes sense here? The third one, state policies, okay? So the states were standing in the way. What are they protesting? They want the federal government to tell the states to stop, because the Supremacy Clause allows that, which is why D is so close, because they mentioned the Supremacy Clause. That's how you get around it. If the state tells you no, if the federal government tells the state they can't do it, they can't, okay? So that's what they're, promoting here through the protest. All right, the Federal Reserve chart shows that a mortgage rate, and you'll notice the next one is kind of, and a lot of you would immediately look at this and be like, all right, I'm out. This is what Ficker was talking about last week, okay? Discount rate is below the conventional mortgage rate. Mortgage is housing loans, okay? That's kind of what they're kind of showing you here, all right? So Federal Reserve chart shows the mortgage rate has no impact upon the discount rate, is influenced by the discount rate, only rises in April due to taxes, is always higher than the discount rate in the spring, okay? So if the mortgage rate, you will notice every time the discount rate goes up, what happens to the mortgage rate? Anytime it goes down, goes down. So the only answer really, okay, is influenced. It's definitely influenced. If the discount rate is raised, the mortgage rate rises, okay? That's what you're getting at. If the discount rate is used by the Federal Reserve to control the money supply and attempt to limit the impact of, remember, what's the only thing, when you were playing chair of the Fed, what was the only other thing? Inflation, right? All right, document 10. Declaration of Sentiments in 1848. He has endeavored in every way that he could to destroy her confidence in her own powers, to lessen her self-respect, and to make her willing to lead a dependent and abject life. Now, in view of this entire disenfranchisement of one half of the people in this country, their social and religious degradation, in view of the unjust laws above mentioned, and because women do feel themselves aggrieved, oppressed, and fraudulently deprived of their most sacred rights, we insist that they have immediate admission to all the rights and privileges which belong to them as citizens. All right, passage relates to the issue of what? Women's suffrage. Very good. You picked up that it's female, okay? This passage would be calling for which of the constitutional amendments? 19th. And this document refers to the Seneca Falls Convention, a meeting called to protest the American government and their policies. This convention is allowed under the blank amendment. What allows you to assemble? First Amendment. Very good. Okay. And then the last one is just a true, I have on my honor read the documents associated with this assignment. You have. So if you have done that and you submit, okay, and I think I keyed in one wrong. The treason one. I'll fix that one, don't you worry. I know I keyed in one of these wrong, so it's the beauty of human error there. So, any questions, comments, concerns? If you're following along, you're already done with the spring break assignment. Fantastic. And a 60 out of 60, or a 58 out of 60 because I'm an idiot. Okay. Folks at home, if you have any questions, please reach out. You can always reach out through email if necessary. Hopefully this clears up that assignment for you.